and welcome to the Rollwise Podcast, your show where we talk about RPGs, the games, and things related to them. And this week, we are going to be continuing on our third and final part of the Game Master's Guide to Proactive Role-Playing. If you want to see the real cover, Brent was nice enough to put the non-battle damaged version on his shelf. And so you can actually see what you should be looking for in the bookstore if you happen to be.
The less tested version.
Yeah, the less tested. Needless to say, I've been trying some of the stuff in here. So I'm giving it a good, honest try. And as with anything that I read related to game mastering, it bits and pieces make it into my toolbox that I'll use pretty much on the regular. So today we actually will be finalizing the last two parts, giving our final thoughts, and we will be finishing this chapter of our book report or something smart. And
part 3 of our book report will be finished.
We'll be finished with the book in its entirety. So, of course, if you guys have other game mastery books that you want us to dive into or you want us to look at, please let us know. And of course, if you like this 3-part series, please let us know in the comments, like, subscribe, do all that stuff to help the algorithm so we know what you guys want to know. Because, obviously we're not talking a ton about D&D stuff, so we want to talk about other things. But this is a D&D book, weirdly enough. So part 3 starts with encounters, and encounters is basically what they suggest is the building block or the unit of play for the game. So not an adventure, not an arc, but the encounter is basically the Lego bricks that they use to fully flesh out the adventure. So let's get into this and let's talk a little bit about kind of conflict, encounter design, and everything like that. So first and foremost, I think when we look at this, I think the encounter design that they have probably is only slightly different than what people would probably do on the regular, unless they're doing their own game. So I haven't really run a significant number of campaigns recently where it's been freeform 100%, but we have been running a lot of pre-generated adventures. From a pre-generated adventure, I think the biggest part is that you're kind of like force-fed your main goal, but I don't think people actually take the time to create sub-goals for their characters outside of that. I know that you guys watch some other actual plays. Do you think goals are apparent when people are doing either homebrew or other kind of thing, or is it something that kind of like comes up as needed in the stuff that you've seen?
I think in most actual plays that I've seen, they're not run in this sense. They're run from a sense of there's a story that the GM has, and the players are kind of playing through that story. In most actual plays, and I think Critical Role or any of the big ones are probably even more so that way. Just so they can make sure certain events happen. Is there some deviation? Probably, but really, I think most actual plays aren't necessarily designed with this proactive style in mind. It would be interesting to see one in a longer campaign, but I think a lot of times in a lot of actual plays, it's more directed, not railroaded, but just directed. Like there is definitely a story in mind, and the characters are kind of given a goal versus having individual goals.
Yeah. And what about you, Jeff? In your experience, do you feel like you've seen a lot of people out there using minor goals for their characters?
I don't watch as much as Brent, but I think that most of the people that I've watched doing actual plays are not doing proactive GMing. And that's not a knock. It's not a criticism. No. I think it's just a fact. Now, some of them are really good, and it feels like they understand what their characters' main goals are, at least as a party. Some, I haven't watched much Critical Role, but I seem to remember once or twice, things veering off or party members going off to fulfill some part of a party member's thing. So they may be doing some of that. But I'm not a regular watcher at all. So I think it probably happens some, but I don't think it happens very much.
I think the characters have goals that develop, or some things come up that's sure. I need to do this. But I don't necessarily think they start out like with this, where it's like, I'm designing the game around your character's goals. I don't think that happens as much. Because I think in a show, like you're going to show up and say, well, this is kind of the idea of what I'm doing. This is the world and everything. And I think that's more like a traditional, it's almost traditional parties are.
Mm-hmm.
But from what I've seen, and there's a lot of pre-gen scenarios where that's really not taken into account.
Sure.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Because I do feel like having the characters having multiple goals, like having a party have a goal, I think is a fairly standard practice. Like and whether you're running pre-generated characters or you're running or pre-generated adventures, like a published adventure, or you're running kind of like your own homebrew, I think as a party, everyone's like, well, we need to go after the Lich's Cup, and to be, or like the Holy Cup to fight off the undead army or something, so they have this like crystallized high level goal for the party to accomplish, but that's really kind of what it feels like. That's the baseline. But I do think that sometimes other goals kind of like organically come up through play, but it's not generally started. So
no, there are some actual plays. I was thinking of a where I think you see that more if it's a campaign designed around one system. For example, like I listen to like Role Playing Public Radio a lot, which is a lot of like short arcs or pre-generated scenarios. If they're in one world for quite a bit of time, though, then you do see those develop. But if a channel is really focusing on one, like I was thinking of this Earthdawn actual play that I listened to, they did that more because their characters were going to be characters that they played basically forever. Like the plan is to just keep these characters going on in one long campaign, and so those characters are definitely more human and have more of their own goals just because of longevity. I think they started out a little bit more that way because that's the way that you keep characters interesting over a long period of time versus like we're doing 6 episodes with these characters through the story arc, and that's what we're doing, and then we're moving on to a different game.
Sure. Yeah. And that's kind of what we do. I mean, we really just test the rules, not necessarily the character. Like we don't develop, I would say, really high level. I don't think we have a high level character development process that we go through. We have, I'd say, mid, we have characters that we feel are fun.
I think it depends a little bit on the game. I think modern games are easier. Like I said, I think your Delta Green characters, I think if I would have finished that game and said, well, what do you feel like 2 goals for your characters are? I think you probably would have been able to think of them almost right off the spot after that one shot. But I think that's easier because it's a modern game, right? Like you can feel those characters easier than in a fantasy game. But I think in some cases we come up with them pretty quick.
Yeah.
You definitely could think of goals for the characters if you wanted to continue playing them.
Yeah. To me, it's just interesting to kind of consider that, to have the goals done before you even start playing the game, and then kind of react to what the characters create, as opposed to just like plopping them down and Hamlet X and seeing what they do and give them and like throw hooks at them,
right?
In hopes that they find something interesting, and then they kind of, their characters blossom from that point.
Right. The difference between this, and we've deviated a little bit from what the chapter's about, but the difference between this and a regular, like one of those other games, is like your characters are writing their own, or like your players are writing their own hooks, and you're really designing the adventure around them specifically.
Yeah.
Well,
it struck me just when you said that if the proactive is done correctly and the players really, you do have the players buy in, I think maybe you have a greater chance of having a longer term success with the players helping drive the story, and the story being, kind of cohesive and not going off the rails as often as when you have one person's vision, no matter how good it is, and then 4 or 5 or 6 players that have different visions, and the GM's throwing these hooks out, trying to see who's going to bite on what. Sometimes I think that's why some of those campaigns go off the rail, no matter how well written whatever the GM has done in the background is. If the players never take the bait and they never bite on the plot hooks, it never really gets off the ground. And I've played in a few scenarios like that. I'm not saying that proactive is magical or anything. It's a lot of work and it's an investment up front.
Right. Well, sometimes what happens is if you do this proactive thing, and have people set up their characters with goals and stuff like that, like what the players are interested in doing. If you don't do this and you set up a scenario, you don't necessarily know what your characters are going to be interested in, and so they become interested in something that you completely different expect than you didn't ever expect. Like
something silly and irrelevant.
Right. Well, like Brendan Lee Mulligan, one of my favorite Brendan Lee Mulligan stories is the one where he's talking about the players were at a wedding and they just somebody off the cuff started a conversation with like the bride, and she's like, yeah, I'm not really interested in, I really don't want to get married to this guy. And like they made it their life goal to like liberate her from this situation and like kidnapped her and like took her away from the kingdom. And he's like, that wasn't the game that I had planned at all. So I had to just like this wedding was just supposed to be a thing that happened in the background, and they made it the entire focus of their campaign. And like, so that's the thing is like, if you have those goals, you know what they're interested in. If you don't, it might just be something that organically big latch onto.
So, and I think this leads into the, like, there's a subsection in this encounters chapter that is like, have players design adventures for you. But I'm kind of curious because I think that, you know, when it's unexpected for everyone, I think it can be a sense of fun and surprise, right? Because like that sounds, I mean, that's so memorable for him to have experienced. But this basically says, you know, like have the players design adventures for you. It's easy to get stuck in the mindset of the player's job is to play through the content the game master prepares. Their pitch, of course, is to get that to leave behind. And so as a game master, you're supposed to review their short, mid, and long-term goals. How close are their goals? Are they encouraged or discouraged? What would it look like when they reach those goals? And then it gives then you have like a weird coaching session with them to kind of like say, what do you expect? How is this going to look? And then I feel like, to me, there's trying to synthesize that in a way that's surprising and fun for the characters seems like odd.
Go ahead, Brent.
Well, what I was just going to say is this is one of those situations where it's kind of like I talked about in the other chapters of the book. Like the way I think this works is doing it when it's important, but not doing it all the time. The book is kind of written sometimes in some sections, kind of like that you should do this for everything as an encounter, which when I GM, I consider anything where there's somebody standing in the way of what the players want as an encounter. Like if they go into a merchant and they want to buy a sword, that's an encounter if the players just don't pay the money. Like if the players are just like, oh yeah, we just purchased that and it's just a shopping trip. But if the purchasers are like, oh no, we want to negotiate to see if we can get the sword for cheaper, that would be an encounter. Like at that point, like there's something impeding their goal, and I would consider that an encounter. If they decide, you know, how much are these burlap sacks that we're going to put over our head and come back later, how much do those cost to rob the place? Like that will be an encounter. And like that's not an encounter that necessarily buys into their like long-term goals or anything like that. So like I wouldn't plan it like they suggest in the book for this one. And I think that's the key is like you use these tools on important encounters, big encounters, sort of like what we talked in Cosmere with the use of the fancy dice.
Oh, the plot dice.
The plot dice, yeah. Like if it's not a plot, like an actual part of what's been, you know, these goals and stuff, like you shouldn't plan it that way. You should plan it more like a fun encounter. And if they decide to make a big deal out of it, like you definitely shouldn't discourage that. You should buy into it.
Yeah, because go ahead, Jeff.
Because you had said, you know, that you didn't think that it sounded like fun if they know that something is coming. And I don't think knowing the main way that something initiates is the part that's fun. I think it's how it plays out. Because like the example in the book is they need to get information from a cult, right? And you could have them ambush some cult members and rough them up a little bit, you know, the traditional D&D, you know, murder hobo type thing, and get the information. But maybe your player doesn't want to do that. Their character isn't going to jump people in the dark and tie them up. They want to try to infiltrate the cult, you know, and that's where the player is driving that part of the story. But what happens once they get inside the cult or try to get inside the cult? That's the part where the interesting, fun stuff happens. And maybe as a GM, it feels like it's taking away some of your agency. And let's not forget, it's not just the players that are trying to have fun, right? The GM also needs to have fun too.
Yeah, and maybe that's the moral of the story is to decide like what parts of the piece are they providing. Because I mean, typically you're going to ask your players, okay, well you're looking for a cultist. What do you want? What do you want from the cultist? And how are you going to go about doing that, right? And so as a GM, even in the moment, you're just going to still go, okay, well, they're looking for a cultist. How easy is it to find a cultist? Do they just walk around the streets? Are they all marked as cultists?
Hey man, are you a cultist?
Do you have headquarters? Have they been able to find the headquarters? Do they know how to search for them? I mean, you're going to do some of that stuff on the spot with them to say like, okay, well, I understand you want to infiltrate the cult. I understand you want to, interrogate them to find the location of the lost flaming sword of super coolness. And so you're kind of doing that on the fly, but I think it just kind of feels like maybe the way it's framed just hits my coaching brain, and it's just like you sit them down and be like, okay, let's talk this out. I'll be back in 10 minutes.
Well, yeah, it's framed in a way, like I said, it's the book is kind of framed in a way that feels like it's weirdly framed in a way that sometimes feels like there's less chance that those like moments of improv are going to happen. And I think if you do it right, I don't think that's the case. I think you're probably still going to hit those moments and it's just going to fly off the handle, where like sometimes those are the most memorable moments, like where your players do that thing that you really don't expect them to do. Make friends with the giant or tie the necromancer up and get the authorities, as opposed to, talking to him or questioning him,
or asking him any questions.
yeah, things like that. Because you just don't know how they're going to interpret how they get to their goals. And I think that's the random question mark. Plus, there's always dice that are going to screw things up for you.
Yeah, probably. Dice can easily mess up your infiltration mission. Super easy. The one thing that is interesting is one of the next sections they went into is asking interesting character questions. And I think that this is something that I probably would do just kind of if a game progressed more than like a 1-shot, 2-shot kind of thing, is that, it's like your characters are stat blocks, but how do you give them depth? Well, you start the game, we'll asking them questions. A simple way of kicking off your session gives players a chance to ease into role playing while thinking critically about the way their character views the world. So it gives you basically a D20 character question generator. That they basically said like they're all stripped from various like get to know you blogs, like mommy blogs and everything like that. I thought that was kind of hilarious, but it's just like, well, what's your sense of humor for your character? So after you've had a couple sessions to play your character and you start to get a feel for him, you can go, oh, well, this is I think he doesn't have a sense of humor. He tends to find people that laugh too much annoying or something. So he's kind of grumpy and gruff.
One of the things that I like in other games, I think Over the Edge does this, is they have a section they suggest in your session 0 where each player asks another player, like you round robin it, and each player asks a player like 5 questions. Like you go and you have to ask somebody different one of the questions every time. And so you just ask them something about their character for them to, and it gives you kind of a quick conversation to like just flesh out your character. With the knowledge that you change that stuff later, like people change. So, but sometimes that's really good at helping identify who your character is, especially if you don't have a strong sense of it.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
But yeah, 20 questions. I used to do when I play any sort of like Shadowrun was one I used to do it a lot. I would do 20 question sessions where it's like I think we did it in some of the low level games that we did. I think we did some 20 session zeros where it's like, okay, well, here's 3 questions. What are they?
Yeah. No, this suggestion I was more talking about just at the beginning of any session, just asking one pointed question to a character.
That's interesting too. Yeah.
Yeah. To like basically say, okay, to further develop your character, Brent, tell me, why is your character so good at languages?
He doesn't have an answer for that.
But you get to think about it.
He's as confused as everyone else.
He's naturally gifted.
And then, it's like, and then of course, Jeff, I could ask like, who knows you best in the world? Is it a player character? Is it, another person? I think that you add those kind of things. And
you're forgetting every adventurer, all their family members are.
All my family members died, Mike.
Yeah,
like when I was like 12.
They were all murdered in the village.
Every character I've ever played. They have no family.
Every family member.
I am the anti-goal generator.
Everybody I know is gone.
To scrape out another meager meal.
You're lucky the party's still alive with how much bad luck I am.
So I can wake up tomorrow hungry again and muster some sort of gumption to fight for another day of breathing air. No, I'm kidding.
It sounds like a Morkborg game more than anything.
Actually, it sounds like Eeyore the Adventurer.
It does. It sounds exactly like Eeyore the Adventurer. It's Eeyore the Emo Adventurer.
Yeah.
I've had a few of those, and we had a game, an Earthon game where we played where the guy wanted to play a ninja, and the GM was like, this isn't that type of game. You can't be a ninja. And so he made a goth assassin that wore a mask and wrote depressing poetry.
I hope they were haikus.
They were. It was.
At least they were on brand then, right?
It was on brand for sure.
Yeah.
Awful haikus.
So, well, speaking of awful haikus, failing forward is one of the sections that I thought. What was interesting is that I think the encounter chapter kind of started turning into just general advice, like how to game master sessions. I don't know if you guys noticed that, but then all of a sudden it started going into.
Did. I saw the improv section, and I'm like, really, a GM has to be good at improv? Who knew?
Well, they kind of Well, I think it was their chapter where it's like, okay, we need to tie everything together now.
Yeah.
And give some general ideas of what may happen, because, like, let's face it, they kind of talk early in the book like, if you do this, a lot of your work is done. But that's not true. Like, you're going to have to do a lot of work. And improv is one of the things that you're going to have to do eventually. Like,
you are.
No amount of planning,
either
on your part or the player's part, it's going to stop the players from going, you know what? That painting in that place that we live is really interesting. I think we should talk about that painting for the next 6 sessions.
Yeah. Hell, our session ended
we
with
asked
us.
if the wall had any distinguishing features, he just said, "Oh no, there's nothing there. You don't need to worry about the wall." And that just triggered me. And
no, he says
he doesn't want us to find the hidden door that's obviously in the wall now.
There doesn't seem to be anything on that blank wall, is what he said.
I need to be more aggressive with my language. There's no fucking thing there.
There's nothing there. Stop it.
All carved out of dirt and stone.
But it is funny though, because in the fail forward section, I did have to laugh, because I think every game benefits from failing forward. I think
it does where it's appropriate, right? There are times where sometimes you try something so outlandish and stupid that if it fails, it deserves to fail, and it shouldn't be allowed to be rolled on again. You know what I mean? Like, it's definitely a no but situation. And I like the example they use. If the character fails a climb check on a rope, they shouldn't plummet off the cliff and instantly die from 20d6 points of damage. And I immediately thought of our Dragonbane game, and I was like, well, a Dragonbane, I'd have killed you. That's a long rope.
Again, this is where I'm going to reject my advice for anyone who's running games or new to running games or makes this mistake once in a while. Never put anything that you need the players to have or learn behind a dice check ever.
Yeah, behind a single solo one time only dice check.
Because if
story lives or dies on the one dice check,
that's your core clue.
If there's a 98% chance of success, no, don't do it.
If you put a core clue behind a skill check, they're 100% going to fail it every time, and they're going to be like, oh, I don't know what to do if you don't find that information. And there are pre-generated adventures that do this.
No, I have played some where if you don't do the trap right, or you can't figure out the puzzle, you can't progress because the secret door does not open. I've had groups stuck for like 3 or 4 sessions trying to solve one puzzle where none of us, because let's be honest, puzzles aren't solved by the characters, they're solved by the players. Right? It's not how genius your character is, it's how smart your players are. And we weren't very smart in that like, it was one of those stupid things that you just couldn't. The solution wasn't complex if you knew what it was, but manipulating the 5 different things at the same exact time in the same exact way that you had to was not intuitive at all, or anything any normal person would come up with. That's, to this day, this is still like 16, 17 years later where I'm like, no.
You're still frustrated.
Poorest written room that I've ever seen.
Yeah, well, or as the game master, I always find it feels like I'm like, oh, the puzzle is way too easy, and then the puzzle is like, and then all of a sudden the players are like, okay, anybody know calculus? I'm like, it's a color puzzle, man. Like, what the hell? Like, you know,
Yeah, but each of those hues has we can assign a number to each of those hues, Mike.
exactly. Well, Roy G Biv. So R is
Okay.
obviously
Okay, there's a circle, a triangle, and a square. You found keys that are circle, triangles, and squares. I think they all go in the square hole. No. No.
I think there was a YouTube video about it where the lady was
There was the lady.
Yeah,
that's
that
your-
broke the
Yeah.
one girl's brain because
Yeah, that's-
everything fit in the square hole. Yeah.
Yeah, that's your adventuring party right there.
yeah.
Can we hit it with a sword? Yeah, I guess.
Does anything
Roll
happen?
damage.
I rolled a 20. Does anything happen? No, the statue still stares at you, unaffected.
I stare back. Okay. 20 minutes later, your eyes are
Sounds like a
watering
staring
from, dry,
contest.
from being dry. I need an athletics check, I guess.
Yeah.
Endurance. That would be an endurance challenge.
So yeah. So I think that honestly, the end of this chapter, when we get into the book, I honestly thought it was good, just overall adventuring advice. It talked about like basically taking detailed notes after the session, and I think that that's good advice for anybody that's playing a long-term game, is to just note what happened in the session to just so you can at least remember what happened, because there are some times when you have like a week off the next week, and trust me, 2 weeks of time is a good amount of time to start forgetting key details.
And you should probably have a player you assign to take notes, but inevitably they probably won't. So you should probably take some of your own notes. So when the players don't remember that plot device that you introduced, you can gently refresh their memory.
Well, but truthfully, enough time can pass that even if you provide them with any sort of like notes or anything like that, it's easy to forget something 7 weeks ago, 8 weeks ago, unless you guys are constantly refreshing yourself, which I would say would be a great tool if you had a bank of notes to kind of just skim through. But maybe that's just
We usually don't.
Homework is always the best thing to give adults, that's for sure.
Hey, I have homework. Why can't I share the fucking love?
Unfortunately, when we choose to run games, we accept the understanding we're going to have to do homework. Players usually don't accept that at all.
I need a new social contract with this. That's what this is about, is changing the social contract for players. Fuck you guys. You guys got to work.
Yeah, kind of. Honestly, it kind of is, because you are going to have players who are like, I don't want to know. I don't want to set goals for my character.
Yeah. Okay. Well, then you can't play. I'm going to get somebody that does. I don't know. Well, we'll see. But so there is an adventure included in the book. The adventure gives kind of a way that they show how you can frame the proactive role-playing session, the kind of way that they set up encounters, the way they set up their factions and everything like that. And it doesn't seem like it would take more than it doesn't seem like it would take more work than setting up a regular one shot. I think it just feels more like you're giving the players more agency and you're reacting more to their characters for their own investment, which is good. You want your characters not to just go through the motion to be like, oh, we got to go save the, princess in another castle kind of thing. You want them to actually enjoy the session and then create interesting characters that have fun in the world. But the one thing I guess I was curious about is that if I was looking at the book, and I'm just talking about the book in general, I kind of wish they would have given more advice for people that do play a lot more published adventures as to how you can frame that within your work. They did talk about it a little bit, and they have like a little green box here that talks about how they don't typically play published adventures. However, they kind of give you some like hooks and stuff like that, just some very bare bones advice. And I think that would have been a nice meaty section that they could have expanded upon. And I think that would actually affect a larger audience.
Well, I think there's...
Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Jeff.
No, I think you're onto something, because I think it could have been a chapter on its own.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the people that are likely to buy this book are people that haven't GM for as long, right? They haven't developed all of their all of the ways that they do everything, right? All of their procedures and all the ways that they like to do stuff and the things that work for their groups. I think they're a little more open in some instances to try something new, but most new GMs aren't going to write, a detailed 300-page volume on their world and So they're going to be relying on pre-canned adventures, which don't encompass a lot of the proactive role playing. So, and I'm not saying that every GM that I've ever met, they buy books, they read sections, they want to learn more, but they still have their way of doing things.
Mhm.
Right? It isn't that they won't incorporate new stuff, but they still have their core way of doing things. And they might take some stuff from proactive role playing, but they might not. They might just go, this just isn't going to work for me, or it's not going to work for me in my group, which are valid answers, right? Not everything is a solution for everything.
Mhm.
I
think it would have been a good chapter.
Yeah, I think it probably deserves its own book to a degree. Like, I would say you could write a whole book about it, because the thing is like, working this into being done with pre-canned adventures is going to be hard, because those pre-canned adventures aren't designed with the characters in mind, which is what
Mhm.
that's the point of proactive
Oh,
adventures.
that's true.
So what you're going to have to do is, most of the
Rewrite.
pre-canned adventures, you'll have to rewrite portions of it you'll
Yeah.
have to change elements in it to make it fit your characters. Or you realize that, or if that's the type of thing that you're doing, like, you can do these things and have kind of general goals and stuff for your characters, and kind of manipulate small things. These are jobs that, like, these are things that you're given to do to
Mhm.
make money, to make your other goals or whatever, and you can kind of frame it that way. But intrinsically, if you're playing pre-canned adventures, it might be more like, you can do this to make your characters more interesting, but these adventures aren't necessarily going to further your character's goals,
Mhm.
because there's no way to have a pre-canned adventure. And I mean, there's ways to do it, sorta, but I don't think, if you're just, I'm going to run this adventure, like,
Mhm.
I don't think you're going to run into the same. You're going to have. You could take an adventure and say, this is kind of the adventure. What do you think you could have for a character with a goal in mind, with this adventure in mind? Like, you could do
Mhm.
that sort of thing. But like, the point of pre-canned adventures is that it's a written story.
Yeah.
Um,
Most of the work's done for you.
yeah, most of the work's done for you. And like I said, the other thing that I think about this book as a whole to take in mind is, there are groups that you should that if they're used to a traditional role-playing game and that's what they like, where the GM runs them through a story that the GM created, make sure you talk to them about trying to do this stuff up front. Because some people, like, some players don't want to do that much work. Sometimes you get a GM who GMs a lot, and then you're like, okay, you're gonna GM in this game kind of too. And the GM's like, man, I just wanted a break. Like,
Mhm.
so that's the thing to remember, is there are going to be some people that aren't going to be as interested. And what I would encourage in that situation is, encourage the people that do have firm goals, and kind of let the other person go. And if
Yeah.
the other people are having fun,
Mhm.
that person will come up with goals for their character. Because the whole point of this is, I think, more than like proactive role playing, written event canned adventures. I think the real meat of this is, what you're trying to do is make your players have characters that they invest in, that they take seriously, and that they really feel something when they play.
Mhm.
And I think that's the important part. You know, and if you do that, like, they'll play the characters to the best of their ability, they'll enjoy playing them, and they'll play them for as long as you want them to, usually.
Yeah, or as long as the natural allowance goes, because
Right.
sometimes you go, okay, well, I think I would like to try something new.
Right, like, but for example, like, I miss our Pathfinder characters. Like, there are times that I think about our Pathfinder characters, and I was like, I really would like to know what they're doing now.
Yeah.
So and I think that and we didn't do the proactive role playing bit. Like, some of that stuff
Mhm.
came out naturally, and some of us had ideas, but like,
No,
it
it's
just
true.
that just tells you how much we were invested and how good the characters were, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is what you want. Brent hit
Mhm.
the nail on the head. The book isn't like, do this and you'll have fun. It's try to get people invested, because that gives you the biggest
Mhm.
chance for everybody to have fun.
Yeah.
Right? If everybody's contributing, nobody's sitting around and being a drag on the group.
And
And
You're
the
gonna have some memorable stuff happen.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. And the more memorable those characters, the more you're invested in that character, the more you're gonna have those moments that stand out as, oh, that was really cool when my character
well,
did that.
and I think we've said it before, so I'll say it again. If you can get the people excited between sessions for the session, not only A, do you have longevity to the game, but B, you have more active players. And sometimes that leads to them learning the rules better. Sometimes that leads them to reading more up on the setting, so they actually, it's not homework per se, but their own desire to be a better participant in this, they will let them do that. Sometimes it turns into rules lawyers. I don't know, maybe. but the idea is that I think you guys, if you're the core is, you guys are spot on in terms of like what you can get out of this. If you can find a way to re-engage your players in a type of game that they find fun and you find fun, and if it lowers your workload some, so you don't feel like you're having to do all the work because you're engaging with your players more, then you can just bring it in. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. I think all in all, I did want to say that I know sometimes it sounds like I'm being negative on this book, because I think it's a lot of tools that people already do if you run games. But I think, and like I said, and there's some concerns I have about people trying to overdo it with some of the stuff in this. But I really do think the book was really good at introducing those concepts, especially into a 5e game. Like, the reason our Pathfinder characters were interesting is because we all bought into the characters. Like, I thought of my character and I started, like, I gave him a nickname and I thought of things that he'd want to do, why he left his previous town and what's he want to do in the new town. And like, that's all stuff that happened because of how I designed those type of characters. Like, 5e doesn't do that for you at all. And that's one reason why this book is good, is because if somebody is in that place of playing D&D games, 5e games, it isn't something they might think about. So introducing these concepts to a GM and players might make them more interested in their 5th level paladin / warlock / thief / sorcerer
/ amazing stat block.
Yeah. So
okay, well, with that, I think we can put this back on the shelf. I got mine on Amazon. I think you can get it in other bookstores, maybe.
I thought I saw it at Barnes and Noble. Don't quote me on that, but I thought I did.
Yeah, so you can at least get it on Amazon. When I bought it, it wasn't like a hugely expensive book, which was awesome. Really, I thought getting it brand new for like 10 or $11 was pretty sweet. And it's a good book for the shelf, and especially since like I said, it has some good concepts.
It does.
I would say it can go on more shelves than just mine and Brent's and Jeff's. So I think you have the PDF, don't you, Jeff?
I have the PDF.
Yeah, so shelf.
Digital shelf. Yeah.
Your digital shelf. So okay, so with that, I think we'll call it good. If you guys have any other books, let us know what you'd want us to dive into, give our thoughts, or at least what you think we could benefit from learning from. I think that's actually another way to put it. If you think there's a good book out there that we could benefit and help improve our game, let us know. We're open to diving into these on a regular basis if people have good recommendations and we can find the books, and not some obscure book from like the late 90s that is the holy grail of DM advice that doesn't exist, but in people's myths and legends. That book may be a little hard, but other books. So, Jeff, how can they talk to us outside of the comment section?
They can search at Rollwise on Facebook, Threads, or Twitter. Or they can email us, rollwiseguys@gmail.com.
And I want to take a quick moment to thank you, everyone, for helping us get to 400 subscribers over the last few months. Thank you, everyone. We really appreciate you. Thank you, as always, for staying with us for this long on this episode. And I hope you roll well, roll wise, and be safe out there.
See everyone.
Thanks.